This is Jack Rice live at the United Nations, and I'm here with Dr. Francis Deng. Again, he's an Undersecretary General and a Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. Dr. Deng, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure to be here.
When we talk about genocide, people think of Rwanda, and they said never again. It's been about 2 months since I was in Sudan, when I was in Darfur, and we called Darfur genocide in, I believe, 2004. And yet, it continues. Never again seems like a great catchphrase, doesn't it?
Right. Well, you know, the thing about genocide is you would think that it is such a heinous crime that there should be absolute consensus on preventing it and punishing it when it takes place. Now, the reality is, in most of the genocides that we now acknowledge as genocide, the acknowledgement came after the fact. While it is taking place, both the potential perpetrators, or those who are actually committing the crime of genocide, are usually in denial. And the world also, which would then be called upon to respond, is also in denial, because what it means is if we say that genocide is being committed, morally and legally, people feel very compelled to do something.
So it's far more convenient to deny genocide than to acknowledge it.
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to Darfur, I have a different perspective. And my perspective is, if you see what's happening in Darfur, it did happen in southern Sudan, it did happen in Nuba Mountains, and in other areas of the country. Darfur is the latest in a series of regional conflicts that have a common base, a common cause. And by calling it genocide, what we have done is raise the level of confrontation. The U.S. said it's genocide, but we're not going to do anything different. The UN said it's not genocide, but things are happening that are just as bad as genocide.
So in other words, when we talk about Sudan, if we're going to stay there for a second, you're also talking about the North-South conflict that killed multiple millions of people. I guess there's the comprehensive peace plan that's been in place since 2005. Is that part of what we're talking about too?
Well, I think what you began with actually is the issue that the guilt over Rwanda is what made people in the 10th anniversary of Rwanda to see Darfur as genocide. And what it has done is it has deflected attention from the real root causes, the political causes of the problem in Darfur, which is not that different from the problems in Nuba Mountains and in southern Sudan. Had we actually focused on making the comprehensive peace agreement between the North and the South genuinely comprehensive, by focusing on the political aspect of the conflict instead of calling it names and then arguing, what do we do now that we call it genocide? We do nothing differently.
See, it's ironic because you would assume that if you call something genocide, that would motivate one to do something about it. You would assume that because of the very word itself. And the fact that we clearly haven't done anything about it, I don't care if you call it a family feud. It makes no difference in the end, does it?
Precisely. I think you're right. But the point is, by calling it genocide, you really create another level of confrontation. And if you then say we must go in to stop what is happening, you are endangering yourself by raising the level of violence without necessarily saving lives. Because I believe that unless a government is so weak, or a state has collapsed, or your vested interests, national interests, are so high as the United States going where it has gone, or NATO going into Kosovo, unless you have that situation, it only makes things worse if you resort to forced intervention. My point of view is, if we are talking about prevention, then the concept of sovereignty as responsibility, which means that the first layer of responsibility is that of the state, and if it doesn't have the capacity to call on the international community to assist, and only as a last resort, which is an extremely difficult one, for which the international community is not well equipped, only as a last resort, when people are suffering and dying in large numbers, and the state is not able to protect them, then do we think of the international community.
All right, so let's not call this genocide, let's not call this anything. We know that the government in Khartoum is unwilling to acknowledge that there's even an issue. We know that Salva Kiir, the president of South Sudan, is either incapable or unwilling, but we'll say for whatever reason, they can't stop this either. We also say that the African Union has troops in there, that the UN says they're going to send troops in there. They're sending in insufficient numbers to do this. It's a very large area, a very small number of troops. If nobody is doing anything, then where do you go next? I mean, what do you do next?
That is the question, and that is a question for which there is no easy answer. I think that the peace that came to the South, between the North and the South, was not because the parties were eager to end the war. It was because of international involvement.